about education at 9 a.m., which I hope we will be able to wake you in the following minutes. But talking about education is challenging today in Europe, as you know, because it's talking about what it's worth saving in this society to bring into the next generation, and that implies talking about parents, that implies talking about free speech, that implies talking about what we value, and an increasing plural world that's a source of tension. So in 1 hour, we are going to try to solve all that with the following speakers. Patrick Coyne, who is a Vice President of Young Americans Foundation. Through his career, Patrick has organized more events featuring prominent conservative speakers than anyone else in the country. Well, you all know among them like Charles Heston, Margaret Thatcher, and most recently Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager. I was saying before to Patrick, because of his nice work, I have lost a decent amount of time in YouTube watching many of the nice conferences they are organizing, and I'm really excited to hear him. He's going to talk about the challenges of conservative students in higher education. And after, we have Daniel Pitt, who is a PhD from the University of Hull, where he focused on British Constitution, conservatism, the Conservative Party. I think the most impressive thing of your CV is that you've been working with Roger Scruton hand to hand. So I'm going to stop that because the rest is it's just going to look like lower. And he's going to talk about the aim of the right to education, the aim of education. I'm just going to give myself. I'm probably the least impressive person in this panel. My name is Ignasi Grau. I'm the director of OIDEL. OIDEL is a Swiss NGO which does advocacy for freedom of education before international organizations. And I'm going to start by that, and then I'm going to give the floor to the other two speakers, and hopefully we will keep it short so we can have a good conversation. So I just want to share with you two things about what is education. What is education? We talk, oops, sorry, can we have the, let's talk about what is education. Many times when we talk about education, we talk it as a public expenditure, a political tool, but if anything, the only consensus we have on education is that this is a human right. So therefore, it is intrinsically linked with our dignity. What is the essence of education as a human right? I think it's important to put some context. In the first draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there was only the first paragraph, the one we see, well, I can read it anyway, which it says, everybody has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. This discussion was really important after this discussion. When they were discussing that, the Jewish council say, listen, we had that in Germany, and we end up by having what we all know, no? A Nazi regime. Therefore, we have to put the soul to education. And education, we should say that what is the aim of education? And they include there, education shall be directed to the full development of human personality, which means like education should enable citizens to raise, to know who they are and choose to know who they want to be. But then the Dutch permanent mission say, like, well, states can say they do that, but then they can do whatever they want. Therefore, we should empower not only the states by doing that, but also parents, and that's why they include parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. And I want to give you a little bit on how are we on that, on the rights of parents to choose the education they want for their children. Can we more? And that's it. Yeah, the next one. Okay, the next one. I've been doing all that in 3 minutes. How impressive, eh? Okay. Then, how are we in the freedom of? How are we on the freedom of education in the world today? OIDEL is publishing every year a Freedom of Education Index. Well, not every year. We have done it in 22, in 2016, and now we are doing in 2023. And the idea is to have an image of what are the challenges of freedom of education in the world and what is the state of situation. I'm going to go straight to the funding, so we have time for the conversation. Okay, fine. Okay, perfect. So do we have more or less educational freedom in the world? If we see it, we have more freedom of education in the world. Not much, but if we see the data of the previous, the next one, yeah, perfect. If we have the data from previous research, we see that in most of the regions, with one exception, freedom of education is higher today than it was in 22 and it was in 2016. What we see in these regions, we see also that the places where there is more region is in the West, in Europe and Northern America, and where we see also that there is that freedom of education is in sub-Saharan African. What are the trends between the countries that we see that there are more freedom of education? It should not surprise us, but are countries that are more committed to human rights, and somehow they have higher income, though there are notable exceptions like Papua New Guinea or Thailand. Where are we in the EU? Where are the countries that we see that there are more freedom of education and less? Well, the ones that are more would be Ireland, but this is more a sociological thing, but I think the ones that are more, a better example are the Netherlands and Belgium. And the ones where we see less freedom of education are Greece and Cyprus. One case that it's more disturbing is Spain. Spain has passed a new law that will limit highly freedom of education, which still has not been highly implemented, but we are looking the case of Spain really close to see where it will go in the years to come. How is freedom of education recognized in the laws? I would say this is quite impressive, but the legal recognition of freedom, most of countries, they have some sort of legal recognition to freedom of education. You know, either through recognizing that parents have the right to choose the right to education, either acknowledging private education, either explicitly talking about freedom of education, but there are 6 notable exceptions, which are North Korea, North Macedonia, Eritrea, Cuba, and Saudi Arabia, which I think is interesting because sometimes we think people really concerned about the link between freedom of education and democracy, but actually what we see is like when people don't like democracy, the first thing they do is limit freedom of education and parental rights. Generally speaking, also, it's still a consensual freedom. We see that in 101 constitutions of the ones we assessed. Even France and the United States, they don't have explicit that in their constitution, but the constitutional courts have said that within the spirit of their own constitutions, freedom of education is important, which shows that still freedom of education matters. And it's a consensual thing, at least at the from a legal perspective. Where are we in terms of funding? Most of the discussions on freedom of education, or at least traditionally, they have been on funding. Do the choice of parents, should the freedom of education exercise should depend on the income of families? And we see in many states, like they say, we are the only ones funding private schools. But generally speaking, what we have to say is like 83% of the CES countries, at certain degree, they grant some sort of financial aid to non-governmental schools. It's true that most of these countries, this financial aid is weak. But in 31% of the CES countries, at least, states grant the salaries of teachers in private schools, which means like for most of families, making this choice is not depending on their income. Among these countries that they are doing better here and that they support highly non-governmental schools, we can count Belgium, Netherlands, Finland, or the United Kingdom. Though there are really good exceptions, there are also good examples in other regions, such as Chile, Peru, or the Dominican Republic. Of course, like we see like the countries that grant more help to parents to choose the education they want for their kids are also the countries that have a better economy, you know, whose GDP national economies are stronger. Do families want more or less freedom of education? Well, we see that across the regions, there are more and more parents that are enrolling their children in non-governmental schools or in non-governmental settings, and that would include also homeschooling. Where we see a biggest increase is in India, 28%, Angola, 12%, Nigeria, 12%, or Hungary, almost 10%. In developing countries, this increase can be explained due to the development of low-fee private schools. But in developing countries where we see the biggest increase is because the states are supporting financially these schools, and the choice of families is not depending on the income. Where we see the biggest decrease is Bangladesh, Dominican Republic, and Italy. And in these countries, most of the explanation there is a bigger decrease is because the states are not supporting the choices of parents. So only the ones with enough resources are able to choose the education they want for their children. We don't have the data, but among the worst examples here, probably we also have Eritrea. Eritrea has took control of many private schools in the countries, but still we don't have the numbers, but probably should be among the worst examples here. And finally, homeschooling. Homeschooling, it has been a really big topic in the last years, especially in the United States, yet also has been a really polarized topic. We see homeschooling it's really hard to assess homeschooling because in most of countries there is not much legal development. Many parents are doing it even in European countries which is banned due to the lack of legal development. But what we can affirm is that it's growing. And today, 43% of the countries in the world enable families to choose to homeschool their kids. Countries, good examples of that would be Serbia, Bulgaria, El Salvador, or Panama. They have made homeschooling more permissive. Some bad examples of that would be France, Switzerland, Uruguay, or Guatemala. A good paradigmatic example of that, as I was saying, it's the US, in where some people are saying that even 8% of children now in the US are being homeschooled. And a paradigmatic example of polarization is Brazil, which in the last national campaign has been a source of big polarization. I want to finish with something that we haven't assessed before and which links with the next topic that Patrick is going to assume. Like traditionally, what we have seen with this research is traditionally homeschooling was really linked with, the debates on freedom of education were really linked with public funding. People were like, listen, as far as we parents, the decisions of parents are not depending on the income of families, we will be able to have freedom of education. But what we have seen is that curriculum is becoming an increasing issue on the choice of parents. And probably in the next years, we are going to assess also how are we doing in that. The other thing that we are concerned and we have seen is, despite the fact like freedom of education has increased, like it seems like if we should, by just checking the laws, that parents have more choices now than they had in 2016 or 2022, it's becoming a topic of growing polarization across the world, and specifically in the Western world. So this is also something that we see with concern. And with that being said, I'm going to give the floor to Patrick to tell us now about the concerns and the tensions in higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's good to see all of you. Hope you're having a great time at the conference, and it's an honor to speak at this panel. But in a way, if you think about it, it's kind of a shame I have to be here. It's a shame, if you really think about it, that I have to come to this program and talk about how challenging it is for conservative students in America to talk about the ideas that they cherish and to organize programs around conservatism. And it's also a shame that on college campuses in America that some low-level administrators and professors feel that they don't have to provide their students with a balanced education, and it's these same administrators that go out of their way to impede conservative activism when it occurs. Now, America and our First Amendment are supposed to be, in theory, this gold standard that protects, free expression for all students. Yet, too many times in our country, students are being deprived of that freedom by their schools. Now, I don't have a lot of time, so there's a lot I could potentially cover. So what I thought I would do, is just kind of go through the general atmosphere of college campuses in America, the challenges that conservatives face in our country, and kind of what we do at Young America's Foundation to try and stop this from happening and how we try and change the scenario, the situation. But from various studies that we conduct at Young America's Foundation throughout the year, we routinely find that students are rarely presented with conservative ideas. We review and audit course catalogs, reading requirements, commencement speakers, and other key metrics that show the true state of higher education in America. And sadly, these reports reveal a stark reality. We have campuses that are basically devoid of intellectual diversity, populated with leftist faculty and administrators intent on indoctrinating the rising generation in the ways of the left. Today's universities create and even trumpet in the United States these diversity and inclusion centers and gleefully release statistics on the diversity of race, gender, and sexual orientation of their faculty while remaining entirely homogenous when it comes to the diversity of thought. So let me dive a little bit into those three studies. So in the United States, in about 250 campuses, before a freshman student even steps foot onto a campus, they are assigned a book to read that summer beforehand. And out of the 250 campuses that have this sort of introductory freshman reading program, only 2 of those schools this year assigned a conservative book. The rest were of a liberal background. We also, of course, review course catalogs. What are the courses that students can take? And sure, it's easy to find classes on obscure subjects like the Queer Bible at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, or transnational feminisms at Dartmouth College. And sure, these schools should be allowed to offer these courses. But on the other hand, can you ever find a course that fairly presents conservative ideas or presents the ideas of Friedman, Hayek, or Bastiat? No, it's impossible to find them. And lastly, schools will then use their commencement ceremonies or graduation ceremonies as one last liberal lesson. Of our last survey of the top 100 colleges and universities in America this year, only 4 schools invited a conservative speaker to those ceremonies. Now, what is worse than having our ideas sort of kept out of the classroom is how administrators also go out of their way to impede conservative activity and sadly even vilify conservative students when they are on campus and when they are active. Let me go through a couple examples. At Young America's Foundation, we send speakers to college campuses. You may have seen the videos. We had Michael Knowles speak at the University of Utah earlier this year, and he was scheduled to speak at the School of Social Work. And the faculty in this building didn't like the fact that, oh no, a conservative speaker was coming to their school to talk about conservative ideas. So what they decided to do in response was they filled this open-air lobby, multi-storied lobby, with about 100 pride flags, just to show their opposition to Michael Knowles coming to speak. When the YAF chapter that was organizing the event asked, hey, can we hang up one American flag? And in response, they were told no. So the message from this department was clear. If you are a conservative, if you are interested in this speaker and their message, you are not welcome here. At the University of Tampa, students serving as resident assistants in dormitories were treated to this widely biased training that included this outlandish scenario that asked, what would you do if a resident felt unsafe because their roommate was a conservative? According to photographs that we received, they presented this slide during the training, and this is what the slide said, quote, you returned from class and one of your residents asked to speak with you. He states he feels unsafe in his room and needs an immediate room change. He goes on to state that he feels unsafe and threatened because his roommate put up a Make America Great Again flag and that his roommate is a member of YAF. I mean, why is it that conservative students and YAF students are deemed a threatening presence just because of their viewpoints? And this brings me to my final point about the atmosphere on college campuses, is that schools so much want to have and ensure that their students feel safe and that students aren't bullied and everyone feels okay on campus. Yet the second a conservative student is attacked or feels marginalized, the school fails to take action. A few years ago, we had Congressman Allen West speak at the University at Buffalo. And the left on campus, of course, didn't like that there was a black conservative speaker there. So after the event, there was this liberal mob that literally chased our YAF chapter leadership across campus. Okay, they were being hounded down by a mob of leftist activists on campus. We had one student, one of our chapter leaders escaped the mob, another was assaulted physically, and our chapter leader, she had to hide in the men's bathroom to get away from this mob. And this, of course, was covered by CCTV footage. There was social media posts about it, of course, and so on. And it took at least 3 days for administrators on that campus to reach out to the conservative students that were chased and asked, hey, are you okay? Do you need support? Do you feel safe? That didn't happen right away. Imagine if that was a liberal student. They would have reached out immediately. They would have shut down class. They would have had little get-togethers to make sure they all feel safe and whatnot. And there's also the leftists that chase down our conservative students, never faced any reprimands, nor did the president of the school or any faculty send out any statement that said something to the effect of, hey, we shouldn't chase down others that we disagree with on campus. We should be allowed to have open discussions at this school. So what I think these examples really underscore to me is, in America at least, how desperate the left is to maintain their monopoly and to keep their core concepts from being challenged. And despite having control of the White House, most of the media, college and high school campuses, there are administrators and leftist activists who feel threatened by the fact that, oh no, there might be conservative students at our campus that just want to talk about and share conservative ideas. And sadly, because of this stifling atmosphere that these administrators create, we have now found that conservative students are fearful of speaking out. We do a scientific poll each year with Echelon Insights, and this year we did that as well. And the poll this year discovered that only 43% of conservative students feel comfortable speaking about their views openly in class, compared to more than 70% of liberal students. And so it's not a good situation in America. And I know that this atmosphere is not just focused on America. I've talked to many young Irish conservatives who have faced similar problems and have had their events shut down by the university unions and so on. So how do we fight this in America, and what do we do at Young America's Foundation? Well, first, what we do is we train our students to be active and physically active on college campuses. First, we have conferences. Some of you have been to those. We welcome all of you to attend them. We have conferences in D.C. and at the Reagan Ranch out in Santa Barbara, California. We protect Reagan's ranch. You can come out there, learn about Reagan, but you can also, what we do at these programs is give students the intellectual ammunition to promote and talk about conservative ideas at their school. But beyond that, we just don't want them learning about ideas, we want them doing something about it. So we encourage them to set up YAF chapters, organize activities, and more importantly, and what we have found to be the most effective ways to get conservative ideas out on college campuses is by bringing in a prominent conservative speaker. So whether it's Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, Mike Pompeo, whoever it may be, getting those speakers on campus to actually have other students who may not agree with us or maybe never have heard of conservative ideas actually have a chance to hear conservatism from an actual conservative and not through the filter of a biased professor. Of course, it was referenced, we also have our YouTube channel, YAF TV. This has been tremendously helpful in us in getting the conservative message out. We have, back since like 2014, we have live streamed and put out edits of almost all of our programs. And we have found that our YAF TV channel has been pretty much the #1 way that young people come to us and become interested in becoming active and wanting to get involved in the movement. We have more than 1 billion views and 1.7 million subscribers. So that's something that we will continue to work on and build. Now, beyond just the activism, we also focus on just exposing all these attacks on free speech. When schools block activity, we get it out in the press. Now, I mentioned that a lot of students are hesitant to being known as a conservative, but what we've established that's been very helpful is we have what we call a campus bias tip line. Seems pretty basic, but students can submit tips through our website to expose what's going on in their schools and in their classrooms. And we get that information, and working with our allies at Fox, Daily Wire, and Breitbart, we're able to spread the message as to how intolerant a lot of these universities are. We also have a congressional free speech caucus. So we have a number of congressmen and senators that we're working with to bring attention to the how students' rights are violated on college campuses, and they're working on legislation to help us. And then lastly, if just exposing these incidents doesn't help, we also sue these schools where we can. Just this last summer, we won a lawsuit against Clovis Community College. We sued them because they blocked our students from hanging up posters around campus talking about the atrocities committed by the communist regimes during the Cold War. They didn't like that. And today, we're hopeful we're going to be suing another school, so we'll be announcing that a little later. So I know I focus a lot on the negatives and the challenges that we faced. However, I think when we have been consistent and we've been bold in promoting conservatism in America, we have seen a lot of progress. When we have thousands of students filling up lecture halls waiting to hear from whoever it is, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, it really shows that students actually do want to hear conservative ideas. They are open to hearing our message. And we also have instances where we will have leftists and leftist protesters come to our events and actually, oh my gosh, hear a conservative speaker for the first time and actually agree with what they have to say and come join us. So that's great. But also exposing the infringements on free speech rights against our students have led to changes at a number of schools. The University of Wisconsin at Madison now includes mandatory free speech training for all students on campus because of what has been going on that campus. And then lastly, I would just conclude by saying, at Young America's Foundation, we have hosted students from across Europe at our programs, and we love to continue working with you all in any way that we can find possible, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So, thank you.
It's great to be speaking here at New Direction Academy again. Bit more of a surprise this time around, but a delightful one. There's one thing when you become a father and you've been mentored by Roger Scruton, you have one thing in common. You get referred to as in proximity to them. So I get referred to now as Montgomery's or Primrose's or Peregrine's daddy, and I get to that chap who studied with Roger Scruton. So that's a thing that you have in common with the two. So education, higher education, we've all been through it. Education, it's important to us as individuals, as parents. We worry about our children's education, and I've got skin in the game, as they say, because I work in the industry. Don't hold it against me, but I do. I had a conversation with the previous editor of Conservative Home, and he just said, "I don't know why you do it. Why be in such a hostile environment?" Well, I question that too, but anyway, onwards. But what's the purpose of it? So, what's the purpose of education itself? Well, Matthew Arnold said that if you are trying to become cultured, or it's about culture, it's about getting to know the best that is being thought and said. So you're trying to pass on from one generation to the next the best that's being thought and said. But that's easier said than done, because what's the best? But it's a great aim to aim for. Others like Cardinal Newman thought that universities existed to mold the character of the student. So it's about character formation. It's about character. Well, Thomas Aquinas, he had a view that all education is ordered towards human happiness. So it's to do with human happiness. Twofold foundation for this it was his view of an Aristotelian Thomist idea of the arts and sciences, and also a view of ethics, a view, again, from Aristotle, a view of ethics of what actually is happiness. So it wouldn't be a sort of a hedonistic sort of happiness of getting and spending type of happiness. That brings me on to the American, people call him the father of conservatism in America, Russell Kirk. And Russell Kirk believed that education was creation of virtue. That's what it was for, virtue. It was to create virtuous citizens. Why? Because you can have self-governance, and so on. He was actually very worried about the direction of American higher education. He thought that government funding in particular could lead to, but government funding in particular could lead to what he referred to as the empire of educationalism. In other words, not education for development of character or virtue or human happiness, but for the type of courses we see on campuses today. Kirk thought that small, private, liberal arts colleges were the way forward for the pursuance of education. So the foundational, the organizational aspect was the way forward. And I cannot now mention Roger Scruton, can I? So here we go. So what was interesting about, you'll notice when I refer to Roger as a person, I call him Roger, and then as a thinker, Scruton. It's just, try to make it objective. Scruton thought that education benefited the individual, and we see that a lot, and you agree, it does. But knowledge benefits not just the individual who has acquired it, but knowledge benefits those people who have not. No, surely not. It does. I don't have any medical training, none. But if I fall ill and I go into hospital, there is trained surgeons who have acquired knowledge and have sacrificed hard work, diligence to acquire that knowledge benefits me because they can fix me cure me when I become ill. So education is a societal good. So actually allowing people who have the ability to acquire knowledge to continue to acquire it and to allow differences in educational attainment is actually a positive for those who cannot attain it. Just like if there's someone exceptionally talented in finance or exceptionally talented in marketing or medical training. So conservatives, as you can see, there are differences there, and I hope that you can see those differences, but there is an overall idea that education is for character building virtue, and education doesn't just benefit the individual, but benefits those who do not wish to or cannot acquire it. But that's great. You think, wonderful, Dan. That's a very nice outline. I hope you think very nice outline of conservative thought on education, in particular higher education. But there are trends across Europe that are not, let's say, conducive to this way of thinking about education. We have limits on free speech. We can see that there was, in the United Kingdom, the current Labour administration, first thing they get in to do, they get rid of the Free Speech Higher Education Act. You can see that there are trends where ideology is imposed. In Ireland, you can see that you are forced to teach in so-called religion and sexuality stuff that there are multiple genders. Is this a good way of pursuing education? What I just outlined before? No. Funding for education. Funding for education is particularly that many higher education systems are funded by the state, and then you have state control. So the question comes up, is private education the way forward? And if so, how do we go about funding these? Or, like University of Buckingham, private university in the UK, great place to study. I know that people in the audience have studied there and could vouch for what a great place it is. But it is one place of sanity in a sea of insanity. in the higher education. University of Hull is also another great place to go if you want to be taught by at least some conservatives. There's a few there. I know it's amazing, but there is. But this leads us to things like, what do we do? You've got equality, diversity, and inclusion. It was interesting. I remember Roger said to me when I was discussing it with him, he said, if you want to get into higher education as a conservative, you've essentially got to do two things. Not do it, number one. Or two, you have to lie, because you're going to have to say in your recruitment package that you believe in all these things that you don't believe in, because you will not be recruited. There are advertisements saying that, are you in favor of decolonization? I need a job, yes. Of course I don't, and no one does who's on the conservative side, but it's a gatekeeping exercise. So what do we do? In the United States, they've got things like at the University of Florida, where they've got the Hamilton Center, a little funded free speech advocates around there. You've got the Benson Center at the University of Colorado, and you've got a whole new institution, University of Austin. So that gives you two options: set up from the very beginning, or attach private or public funding, like in Florida, to universities that are already established. Or do you go down, which is relatively new, the Peterson Academy? Do you have people like James Orr, who was here yesterday, and Lord Roberts to give classes online and disseminate them out? Is that the way forward? But there are already places doing similar things for a long time, like great courses in America. You can get Audible. If you don't have an Audible, I don't work for them, so this is not commission, but get an Audible app. Great courses. You can get T.S. Eliot, History of London, The American Constitution, Conservative Tradition by Patrick Allett. $7.99 a month. Get it. Get your conservative education if you're not getting it from university campuses. Modern Scholar. So conservatives have to think deeply. We've got the foundational ideas. I've just outlined them to you, but there's choices to be made about what do we do moving forward. And that moves out my area of expertise and over to the wonks, the policy wonks, to put together the policies for us to have the institutional framework and the funding that we need going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll be taking questions from the audience now, or comments, or critiques, as you wish. Do we have a mic? Oh, wait.
Yes, about your presentation, I could not catch up point 3 about the indicators for freedom of speech. Can you maybe repeat that?
Yeah, we don't, well, I mean, our research, the Freedom of Education Index, is focused on primary and secondary education. And as you know, like, children in this age, I mean, the idea of higher primary and secondary education is like, as children are not able to exercise all their rights, a big part of freedom of education is to assess the ones responsible for the exercise of this right, which are parents. And so therefore what we are assessing more than freedom of speech on children, which it would be interesting of doing, is like to what degree the rights of parents as responsibles of the exercise of the rights of their children are being respected. But on freedom of speech, on this regard of teachers, we don't have that. Also, we are facing one new challenge on that, which I think is interesting with the Freedom of Education Index. We've been doing, the first time we did that was in 1995, only with 80 states, and now we did it with 157 states. Traditionally, and that's for us the big trend, this research has been done with many official data from UNESCO and the World Bank, but also we've been checking this data with civil society actors, especially like school administrators of non-governmental schools or parents associations. one thing that has surprised us a lot from this time is that traditionally the name of the game for them was funding. They say, like, listen, as far as we have enough funding, we will be able to have autonomy and develop our educational project. And parents felt the same way. But what we have seen with this new research, and that's something that we will lead in future research, is that there has been a broken consensus in education. And many of them, they felt, even private schools, non-governmental schools, they felt like we won't be able to develop our educational programs because of the limits imposed by the state. And even parents are feeling the same. Like, especially people with a faith-based background, they felt like either like the limits that the state is seen to want to impose in the years to come are completely incompatible with our faith or our. So this is something that we will have to assess soon.
Okay. I do have another question. I think all around the world we see that universities become more woke, to say. And my question to you is, to all of you actually, how can we actually fight that? Like, I see that it's a whole system that we have to fight against. And I have already heard ideas to expose the free speech violations and to invite more conservative guest speakers.
Yep.
I think these are two concrete ideas that can help a lot, but how can we really fight this whole system and get more balance in, that we have also more room for conservative ideas, and also that the system is, how to say, like, it's that all the mechanisms inside this system, are working for us in our favor. That's actually the question.
You want to start, Daniel, Patrick, and then me?
Yeah. One thing I would say, who's at the coalface at this, is that students play an incredible, important role internally. Just ask. Ask your professor or whoever's teaching you. What did Edmund Burke say? Could you suggest an article that Burke wrote? And so we had a program which I started teaching, was Introduction to Western Political Thought, and you had Locke, you had Hobbes, you had Arendt, and you had so on. There was no Burke at all. So I just introduced it. Just introduced him. There you go. There's Burke. So there is. It can be. That's just an everyday thing. Email. I could see on the reading list there is no one. There's no Russell Kirk. Can we have Roots of American Order, please? You writing it and sending it as an email makes it very hard for them to say no. They might then try and opt out by then saying, "Oh, perhaps we could, when we do a review of our content, we'll do it next year." But you've planted it. And in class, just raise it. Just say, didn't Edmund Burke say something about this? Or when you're reading about Mary Wollstonecraft, didn't Mary Wollstonecraft argue against Burke? Yes. So wouldn't it be good if we included Burke in the conversation? So it's not just Wollstonecraft, it's Burke and Wollstonecraft. So these sort of things, just ask for it.
I mean, I would add, what the good news, too, in the States is there are a few universities that have come out in support for free speech. So the University of Chicago has a statement. Vanderbilt University has also come out and said the goal of education is to not shelter students from ideas, but to have them discuss those ideas. The issue that we find, though, it's not the leadership of the school, and sometimes it is, of course, but sometimes the leadership of the school is for these ideas. It's the lower level administrators and deans who don't agree with that mission. So what we find when I'm trying to get a speaker onto campus, whether it's Vanderbilt or wherever, it's fighting with the guy who doesn't want to give his auditorium over to us to have the actual event. And so we have to then go to the leadership, go to the trustees to help change the situation. That's another thing that you should also look at. If you have issues with free speech on your campuses and you can't get anywhere with the leadership, sometimes you can look at the board of trustees, board of governors, whatever they're called, and you can look up, at least in the States, you can look up if your board of trustees, any of the individual members have given to conservative candidates, and if they have, those are the guys you go meet with, because they're the ones who can tell the university president, hey, we need to change the situation and allow conservatism and conservative ideas to be discussed on this campus. And the good news in the States, too, is you do have choice. If you don't want to go to Berkeley, you can go to Hillsdale. So there are some strong conservative schools that you can get a true classical liberal education if you don't want to spend your money, thousands and thousands of dollars, on being indoctrinated. So.
I think. Well, the question is complex. Otherwise, we wouldn't, and it's not easy. No, there is not an easy answer for that. But one thing in Europe, one friend of mine, who's more like a lefty, he told me like the main problem with the non-left pupil is that you are many times facing the cultural war without taking any risks. And he said, like, the generation of my parents, they were willing in countries like Spain to take risks, like eventually being expelled of the university. I think this is not easy. But what we can learn from the US and what these people used to do, and I think that's something in Europe what we should start doing, is having a community. I think that YAV is a good example of that, because the most scary thing for a student or for a teacher or for is doing that alone. Yes. Being isolated. Thinking alone, I think it's a torture. But if you do that with a community, if you do that with a group, the game changes, and you are willing to take risks with a camera, with a colleague. And I think that's the thing we have to start doing more in Europe. And the good results of that is what has happened in the US, I think. I think you are changing the conversation on this regard thanks to the idea of not doing that alone.
Yes.
And we cannot expect this sort of heroism of people doing that alone in all universities, because it's hard, and many people need the college degree. So we have to support these people doing that by creating communities, I think.
Yeah, we should definitely increase. As I mentioned, we do bring over students from Ireland to our conferences, students from Europe. So we'd like to increase that. But what we see in America is, students always come to our conferences and they'll be shocked. Like, there's 400 other conservatives there. Like, I thought I was alone. Yeah. And so they come to our conferences, get fired up. They see the other conservatives there and know, I can do this. And we see this effect at our conferences, too, where a student will come to our events as a single conservative, right? They'll see the other students there. They see they can make an impact. So they go back to their school. They start their chapter. They become active. And the following year, they come back with 10 other students. So it grows. So it can happen. You can be successful by being active on campus. So.
Thank you, all three of you. And I think that is a really great point that you just mentioned about not going it alone,
yes.
Not isolating yourself, not creating a subculture. And I think that was one of the biggest mistakes in higher education in the U.S. in early last century. The Christian fundamentalist movement pulled out of universities now that are totally secularized, but were founded on Judeo-Christian values, like Georgetown, Princeton. And then I did my undergrad at the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, which is a nice, cute little liberal arts school in Southern California. But it was founded by people who thought, oh, this is going the wrong way, which they should have instead stayed engaged with mainstream culture and steered it there. Now we're on the defense and trying to get back in. So not going it alone, not isolating ourselves, staying engaged, I think are really important, and thank you, all three of you, for doing that. My question is for you, Patrick. I would like to know which of the two schools assigned conservative reading, and I want to know what those two schools are, and I want to know what 4 schools you mentioned invited a conservative speaker to commencement.
The 2 schools that signed a conservative book, and this will not surprise you, was Hillsdale and Northwood University, which bills itself as America's free enterprise university. It's in Michigan. Yeah, both in Michigan, I don't know. So go to Michigan for conservatism, I guess. But as far as the conservative speakers, I don't recall who they were offhand. It's on our website, but we've been doing the commencement survey for close to 30 years, and it's amazing that the schools, you have Ben Shapiro is the most requested speaker in America, best-selling author, never invited to speak. Al Gore hasn't been popular or relevant in decades, he's always invited to speak. Fox News is the most watched news network in America. None of those anchors are invited, but sure, ABC, come on down, come speak to our students. So it's just an ongoing pattern. So.
Thanks, guys. How do we give students a strategic edge on campus? We were talking about the legal side of things and talking to faculty, but I don't know what the experience here was, but back in my time in university, campuses, your campus staff were kind of useless in terms of trying to stand up for your even safety. Like, how do we give students in that kind of environment the ability to almost strike back? One example off the top of my head, back in my day, Nigel Farage was invited to speak at my university, and very quickly an Antifa protest advertisements popped up around campus. Turned out those posters were made by the people organising the event. And the time on it was an hour after Farage would have left.
Oh, how smart of them.
At the end of the day, the local lefties who turned up to that protest looked stupid.
Yeah.
And it was a big moral boost for everyone on campus who was conservative or right-leaning. How do we give students and young people the ability to do that kind of operation, to you know, kind of move forward in the culture war, not backwards, if you will?
Do you want to start?
I love that putting the time an hour later, that when after he's left, that's very amusing. I'll tell you what I did, and then that perhaps might be a good idea. Is that I started to find people who were fellow travellers, and we started meeting up, and then we started to do it online actually. So then the costs are lower. More people from different places. So we have people in our, we call it now a Conservative Philosophy Club. It's online, about 40 of us, and we got academics from Malta to Belgium to Canada coming online and discussing it. We literally just say, "What shall we just discuss this chapter?" and so on. So I think ideas matter. Richard Weaver was absolutely right to point that out back in the 50s. Ideas do matter. He didn't want the title, but he should. It's a great title. So I come at this from the intellectual side. So strengthen your intellectual arguments, first of all. Get to know the conservative ideas, and then move on to activism and join other groups and join other people. I think it's really important to show that liberals or socialists that there is such thing as conservative ideas, and they are incredibly powerful ideas. And I think that if you can get the ideas element right, then you can. That's the foundation for me, and then you can move forward like that. But for me, it was really important not to be. As a student said earlier, not to be intellectually lonely. You can be also intellectually lonely. And guess what? There are loads of... You can have communion with the dead by picking up a book. So go for it.
If you want to be active, you also need to know the ideas behind it. So we teach our students to be daring, discerning, disciplined, and sophisticated. And so you can't just be obnoxious for the sake of being obnoxious, although that can be fun. But using those guerrilla-style tactics to make fun of the left. And here's what we in the States do, which is a mistake, is we give, I guess, or assign too much power to the left, right? We think, oh my gosh, they're going to come after us, they're going to attack us. Like, guys, these are just other students. Who cares what they think about you? Like, I think, and look, we as conservatives, we're not natural activists, right? We don't want to get in people's faces. We want to be left alone. We don't want to be bothered. And so that is a challenge for our side. but it's about incremental steps, right? So it's learning the ideas, knowing the arguments. And so when you go out on campus, you are confident and you know how to respond. And when you have that initial success, you build on that. And it's going to the conferences, building your network, and then organizing the events. And then in the States, you have Young America's Foundation, you have Breitbart, you have Daily Wire, you have all these groups that are backing you up. And this is what we really focus on at Young America's Foundation, is we always say to our students, we have your back. And so if we're working with a student, and if it's 10 o'clock at night and they learn that they're facing disciplinary action, I will reach out to that student and talk to them and calm them down and make sure they feel okay. And so we have a legal team, we have our field team that goes out and helps students. So I think in other countries we need to build this network of on-the-ground support, but also just the quote, customer service, if you want to call it that, of always being around to help students. And I think what's great in Ireland now is you have GRIPT that is available to people to expose what's going on Irish campuses. So I think there should be sort of a campus-biased tip line for GRIPT, there might be, but where, all these incidents that are going on Irish campuses that are outrageous and squelching of free speech, GRIPT should be getting out there and students should be reporting that, and we should create this network of infiltrators, secret spies, so to speak, of exposing what's going on. So,
if I can say something, I've been supporting a lot of parents and non-governmental schools in struggles with bureaucrats or officials, and one thing I have learned in these years, and it can also be applied to higher education, is like, with a good argument, it's difficult to change their mind. Like people, also, you need to go here, but also you need to go to the heart. And what changed here, things are explaining their own stories. Like we have been able to change narrative in some political discussions just by making sure that some parents were meeting certain officials or politicians and explain their story. I think that also goes on, and I think for conservative it's great. Like we love great books, and that's why, because it's a great way of explaining a good argument with a lot of good stories. So. Also, there is a big part like encountering the other and explaining them. Many of them, they will hate you anyway, but it's easier to hate someone who doesn't have a face. And I think this is a big part of what we, other than having a group, like also taking the risk of talking to these people face to face, and so they get to learn why do we care about that at the personal level, because then they will see, maybe some of them they will hate, but also some people will change their mind, but they will say like, okay, I don't share it, but I respect it, and some might change their mind. But I think without the storytelling, and I think the left has worked a lot on that, without explaining ourselves why we are here, it's hard to change the whole mentality of the people. And I think this is maybe the next step in higher education. It's risky because no one wants to expose themselves into these things. But again, it's difficult when you are alone. But if we are able to make that as a group, or we have like platforms in which people can do that, they do that and they have like some sort of place that I've been heard. Okay, don't worry, we are your friends. We are here. It will be easier to go this way.
Yes, thank you very much for your speeches. I'm curious about the overarching strategic approach to change the situation. And you have mentioned several things. Patrick, you mentioned the work that you do with existing public universities, if I understood you right. And that was a lot of stuff. And Dan, you mentioned new innovative education initiatives like the Peterson Academy. That may be one other approach. I'm just wondering, can there also be, what's the most important strategy here to deal with the situation? Is it work with the existing universities, build up new ones, or is there a need for more non-profit organizations like YAF? And why, if you had to choose here, because I'm a strategy guy, so I like to, if you diagnose the problem, you need a strategy. You cannot just say, we just need a combination of things. You need to settle your priorities. What's needed, number 1, 2, 3, and why. We all understand this is a complex situation and we need a diverse approach. But I'm just wondering if you could comment on what do you think are the most important ways to deal with the situation and why? What resources are needed to enable that?
Well, I would go, my strategy would be called build and renew. So build new, so you can look at things that in America, in the American context, you had build new, you had national review, because there were so many liberal magazines. You had
Yes,
National Review, you had Modern Age Journal, you had University Bookman. So you had new publications coming out. Modern day thing to do with this would be create podcasts. Create them. Talk to your friends on them. Just create a podcast. Discuss your beliefs and values. So you could see in Britain, Roger Scruton, he created the Salisbury Review. So again, a new publication. You've got now in Britain, you've got the Critic magazine, which I've written for, which is a new institution. You've got GB News, which is a new institution. So there is build, but there's also renew. You can't just let these organizations just go and just leave them and be hotbeds for indoctrination. So you need to get in there and do the active, like Patrick is outlining excellent examples. He's the man for that. So both. You have to build new. Look at the past. Past gives us a really good examples. How did conservatives do it in the past? Well, new magazines, new television channels, and we do the same. And we utilize modern media too. YouTube. Actually, the entry barriers are so much lower now. They're so much lower. Podcasts, you can just set one up, done. YouTube channel, set one up, done. So build and renew.
I mean, you nailed it on the head. And I mean, I wouldn't go any further than that. You got to use every approach, right? Like, I mean, it's great to have Hillsdale. It's great to have Grove City College, but those only accept about 2,000 students. So, I mean, there's a lot. So you can't just go with just Hillsdale, and they're great. So you got to have conservative missionaries still going into these traditionally left-wing campuses and making sure there is some type of balance. And it does take time. I mean, when YAF, when Young Americans for Freedom was founded, I mean, the conservative movement was small. We were founded in 1960. At the time, there was National Review, ISI, and Foundation for Economic Education, probably. So, like, but from that time, it's built up. There's NRA, Heritage, and so on. So it's going to take time to build these institutions, to build the support. But like you said, just re-emphasizing, it's the barrier for entry is so much easier. You can do it. We can have a bunch of citizen conservative journalists all over Europe reporting on what's happening on college campuses and in secondary education. So, do you want to?
No, I think you cover it pretty well.
Yes, I'm from the Netherlands, and in Netherlands it's actually very uncommon and hard to establish a new university, for example. Also, we don't have really a tradition of liberal arts colleges and private universities. Most of the universities are public universities. However, there's now a new liberal arts college in the making, which is more classical and conservative. And within a few years, they hope to offer official degrees. And my question is, how can they make it an success? How can they attract staff and students? Why will students and staff not go to the bigger and famous universities, which are literally surrounding them?
Answer in short, get faculty that people want to be taught by. It will attract people. University of Buckingham, which is private, set up in the early 1970s, they get people like Jonathan Sumption, a Supreme Court Justice. They have people like Michael Gove, ex-politician, teaching there. They have people who were taught by Roger Scruton teaching there. They also have had people like Anthony O'Hare, great conservative philosopher. So if you get the faculty right, the students will follow because people want to be taught by great faculty. That's my one advice. Get the right faculty. If the faculty are wrong, people won't come and it will die.
Yeah, no, I see that with many universities around Europe, having the same challenge. And I think, like, if you have your mission clear, there is no much room for there are not many conservative schools around Europe, but there is a big audience interested of that, especially in a point like some books are banned, some pedagogics are just excuse my language, but you know, like people just go to literature and they say like, are we going to talk about Shakespeare at any point? Or Cervantes? And no, because some of these are apparently super offensive. So if you have a clear mission and you say, listen, we are, people know exactly what are you offering, you probably many of countries, like in the Netherlands, you may be the only one. And I'm sure there is enough audience for that. So, but you have to be, the problem for me, for these faculties, and I know many entrepreneurs who have started universities, and that is like, when they try to, we want to be that, but at the same time, we want to be also a mainstream university. Well, there are already mainstream universities, and they are better than you. So maybe just be yourself, be what you want to do, and there is an audience for that.
I have a question for Mr. Patrick.
Yep.
We are from a conservative student party in the Netherlands. And 2 years ago, we wanted to organize an event on campus with speakers like Jordan Peterson and a Dutch politician of a center-right party. But the board of university rejected it because, according to them, those speakers were not in line with the Erasmian core values. But often student parties like us or student associations, they don't have the legal context or financial resources to overrule that decision. And you talked about the Young American Foundation, and you basically have a whole infrastructure of contacts with big media platforms such as the Daily Wire and Fox News, and also financial resources to take the board of universities to court. And my question is, I have basically two questions. First question is there already a European variant of Young American Foundation? And if not, is that maybe an option? And the second one is, it's related to the first question, should we do that on a national level, so more decentral? So an infrastructure for the Netherlands, separate infrastructure for Denmark, for example, or should we do that more on a central level, so on a pan-European level? Because some European countries maybe don't have much right-wing media that can back them.
Sure. Yeah. What I would recommend, one I would say to all of you is that the conservative movement in the United States wants to help, right? So when incidents like these happen, like, please tell us. Several years ago, when we brought our first group of Irish young conservatives to our conference, one of them was attacked mercilessly by the Irish press because, God forbid, he went to hear a sitting vice president of the United States, Mike Pence, at our program. And so we then, and so we got involved. We got the press stirred up about it. We got other conservative outlets. So you have allies in the United States that are willing to bring attention to these incidents. So maybe what we need to do is figure out how to, bridge those connections and working more together with all of you and creating a more global conservative movement, per se, and aiding each other. Because I think we would be willing to help expose what's going on in the Netherlands as well. I would focus on, would we aid you all in some ways? Yes. So we've had similar organizations in England that sort of modeled Young America's Foundation. There wasn't a direct connection, but yes, there have been groups similar to ours that they've established, and we worked with them on setting up programs and training seminars and so on. We've offered to do that here in Ireland as well, and so we'd be happy to work with you to do the same. I mean, you know your country better than we do, so I would focus on what works best for you in your area, and not focusing across Europe per se. I don't know if you want to add. You, okay.
Last question, maybe, no, I think. Last question.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for all your thoughts and insights within the area of educational freedom. I have, maybe it's a question, but my thought of this is educational freedom, it starts in the kindergarten, I think. And coming from Sweden, we do have problems already in kindergarten with the teachers forcing very strange ideas on the kids. And I think this is the start of the problem, because then they continue all through life. And when they start in middle school and all that, it sort of forces the already forced stupid ideas. And my thoughts is we should really start in kindergarten, I think. Even though it's good in the higher education, but we should really start in kindergarten, because it's the beginning of the whole life, you know. Myself, I was home with my boy for 3 years, and it was a beautiful time for me to get to know him and be a part of his life from he was born until he was 3 years old. But it was a shock for me and my son when I had to enroll him into kindergarten. But he was a strong boy, because I could talk to him about the differences and he understood. But I saw so many other kids that started from the first year, like 1, 2 years old, and they struggled with their identity, and the teachers just forcing these stupid ideas onto them. And I'm happy for my kid, but I know so many of my friends, they didn't have the possibility to stay home for that long. And I really want to start a kindergarten with the conservative approach. We don't have that in Sweden, and I think I will be, you know, I'm so encouraged after just being here for 2 days. And that's what I need to do, I think. That's my new calling, because the Swedish kids, you know, they need that. Okay, no question, sorry. Okay, thank you.
No, but I mean, if I can just add, I think it's a really good point, because that's basically what we have been, a big part of this conversation now, is freedom in education. It's different depending on the stage. Now, as we were seeing before, the freedom of education is like giving parents the right to choose, because we want to raise the kid knowing who he is, what are their values, in order that later he can go to an institution such as the university, which should be the open space in which they can discuss that openly. And today it looks, and in university where we talk is like freedom in a sense, like we want free speech, we want to talk, we want to discuss, we want to be offended. Now what is weird, it's the other way around. Some people seem to want just the reverse. They want primary and secondary education as a place of exposure, as a way like in which people can have the dialogue, an open dialogue about anything. And that once they go to higher education, they say like, no, this is what you're going to teach, like more. So I think what we have to go back, well, we don't have to go back. We just have to go into the essentials and do what the best educational systems have done. Like primary and secondary education, their main purpose is to prepare a man to go out there. And higher education is like you're already men and you are ready already to have these open conversations. And that's we as conservative, but even I think it's just common sense. We should go back to this idea, like let's prepare children to be men, and once they are men, let's encourage them to act like men, and not as we are doing now.
I agree with what you say. The first 1,001 days of a child are incredibly important. There's loads of research that proves this for identity, development, reading, writing, and so on. Those first 1,001 days are incredibly important for the development of a child. I think it might not have been Lenin. I don't know. If I was wrong, let me know in the break. But it says something like, give me your child until the age of 5 and I'll have them until the rest of their life. And it's true. It really is. And let me give you one example with my children. I've sent my children to a Catholic school. I'm not a Catholic, I'm an Anglican, but I think Catholics are doing better at fighting the weird ideas, as you put it. And she now reinforces my Christianity. So it's an enforcement loop. I've chose her to go to this school, she's loving it, she's coming back, she's reinforcing my religion, she's telling me, Daddy, let's pray before going to bed. She's 5. Let's pray before we go to bed. And that's the way forward. So it's absolutely imperative that we get education right from the very, very beginning, because we teach our children, our teachers teach us, the loop continues, and they do the same for their children. I agree.
I'll just add that at Young America's Foundation, I've focused a lot on college campuses, but we also have what we call high school programs, and we recently started programs for 12 to 16-year-olds, so what we call middle school. So we do recognize that students, and I've seen it with my own daughter growing up in public schools. She was indoctrinated, or they tried to indoctrinate her. I brought her to our programs, of course, and I taught her the right way. But I mean, you're right. They start very young to just undermine what you're trying to teach. And so we're trying to combat that by having programs for younger and younger students. And it's a learning process for us because we learned you can't have a 13-year-old boy go on a ranch tour and then go sit and have a classroom discussion. That's just not going to happen. So we're learning this, but it's definitely worthwhile, and we're trying to activate these students to be active in the conservative movement at a younger age. So,
well, thank you so much for your time. I think we leave with more questions than answers, which is always a good sign. And we just have to wait now to create a Young European Foundation to solve the rest of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want